The wind whispered through the stalks, swaying them gently as the sun dipped low in the sky. The golden glow of twilight cast long shadows over the expanse of cornfields. It should have been a peaceful evening, but on that particular night something felt off. In the heart of that sprawling farmland stood John, a weathered farmer with stories etched into the lines of his sun-baked skin. He had watched these crops grow from seeds to towering stalks nourished by sweat, toil, and a fierce love for the land. Yet John wasn't just a farmer, he was also the watchful protector of his crops, vigilant against the unseen threats that lurked in the darkness. As the sun sank lower, John stood at the edge of his field, the scent of damp earth mixing with the sweet decay of ripe corn. In that fading light, he spotted a movement, a shadow flitting between the rows, a flicker of instinct twisted in his gut like a coiled snake. He wasn't alone, others were moving, too creeping, sneaking, using the cover of the corn to mask their approach. The last rays of sunlight illuminated a slender figure. John stilled, narrowing his eyes. It was tough to make out, but he recognized that silhouette all too well, a trespasser. John had seen this before, a gang of kids from the neighboring town, thinking it was harmless fun to run through his fields, trampling the crops, causing chaos. They didn't understand the blood, sweat, and tears that fed every stalk, but he also knew these weren't just kids. The shadows held a more sinister energy. His heart pounded as he scanned the field, counting the figures, 3, maybe 4. They were hunched low, moving quickly like rabbits in a predator's sight, their breaths soft against the hush of the evening. Each step they took crunched the earth beneath them, snapping twigs like fragile bones. Adrenaline kicked in. John gripped the handle of the pitchfork he normally used for his hay during the day. It felt heavy in his hands, still, it offered him comfort. He advanced slowly, knowing the terrain like the back of his hand. He'd worked these fields for decades. Every dip and rise, every swaying stalk was a part of him. As he grew closer, the flash of shiny metal caught his eye. A makeshift flashlight flickered on in the darkness, illuminating the trio in a pale glow. John froze, every instinct warning him to keep quiet, stay hidden. But just as fear began to twist in his chest, curiosity took root. Why were they here? A risky creep brought him close enough to hear their hushed voices, plotting something sinister. "We can just grab a few ears of corn and get out," one said, his voice laced with bravado. Suddenly, another voice spoke up. This one was sharper, laced with a threat of anger. "We're not just stealing corn, Michael. We need to show them we're not afraid." Or, John's brow furrowed, take back what? He didn't know what grudge these kids bore against the land they were trampling, but it sprouted a bitterness within him. His crops weren't merely plants. They were a lifeline, a legacy planted and nurtured by generations who came before him. Closer look showed John that one figure was a girl, perhaps no more than 16, her face cold and determined under the glow of the flashlight. The light played off her features, illuminating a fierce intensity in her eyes. "It's just corn," she hissed, almost defensively. "No, it's not," John murmured to himself, stepping back a little to avoid being spotted. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just about theft. It was a rebellion against the very fabric of what farm life meant to the town. He could see they were fueled by a resentment, a misunderstanding that pushed them into the shadows. He thought back to the summer he'd spent working every single day, his hands raw from the labor, the sun beating down on him relentless. The blood, sweat, and tears he'd poured into this farm were not for wealth or glory, they were for the joy of nurturing life. There was a strange resolve swelling within him now. While a part of him urged him to confront them, another part, a cautious voice rooted in the wisdom of years, reminded him that confrontation could escalate quickly. Suddenly, the voice of reason was drowned out as Michael shouted, breaking the hush of the evening. "Let's take a stand." Fear washed over John like ice water. He could feel tension tight in the air, an unsteady thread threatening to snap. If they were armed with more than bravado, the night could end in chaos. What if they had other plans in mind, something darker? Taking a deep breath, he emerged from the curtain of corn, the rustle of the leaves announcing his presence. His voice boomed across the field. Every head snapped in his direction. Eyes wide, they blinked in disbelief, caught in a moment they never saw coming. John stepped forward, his sturdy frame casting a long shadow over them. They looked small and fragile, suddenly like blades of grass bowing to a storm. Tension crackled in the air. "Just taking a few ears," Michael said, his bravado faltering as he took a step back. John shook his head, sensing their fear. "It's not just corn," he repeated, each word palpable, heavy with meaning. "This is my life, my family's story." The girl, still defiant, crossed her arms. "You don't understand us. I don't understand what you want to take back," he shot back. "But this isn't the way. You're not powerless, you're just lost. You look at these fields and you think they belong to me." At that moment, the sky overhead darkened and a rumble of thunder sounded in the distance. It was as if the heavens were echoing the tension brewing between them. "Look," John continued, lowering his voice, "what if we had a conversation?" Slowly, something changed in the trio's stance. They shifted, almost imperceptibly, like leaves catching a fleeting breeze. The girl's defiance began to soften. John took another step toward them, noticing how the night enveloped them more tightly. "Let's sit, talk about the why of it all. You can share your frustrations and I can share mine." Michael scoffed, but it lacked conviction. Trust me, it's better than this, John pressed, motioning to the field around them. If you leave now, I promise not to call the sheriff. A moment passed, uncertain, flickering like the dying light of day. John could feel the weight of his words, the truth heavy in the air. They had a choice to make. He hoped they would choose wisely. The girl exchanged glances with the others, the fire in her eyes dimming, uncertainty replacing it. Finally, she nodded. As they began to inch forward, a crack of lightning split the sky, illuminating the cornfield in a blinding glow. The storm was here. John motioned for them to follow him to an old wooden bench, a relic of days gone by when neighbors gathered for laughter and storytelling. They took a seat tentatively at first as the wind whipped around them. I've built this farm through storms and droughts, he began, remembering how he'd once sat with his father under this very bench. I understand loss. We all have our fights, our battles with this world. As the rain began to patter down, a soft rhythm against the earth, the tension eased. The three intruders leaned in closer, intrigued despite their doubts. John spoke of the hard work that went into caring for the land, the planting, the tending, and the harvest. With every story, he saw their walls starting to crumble. The girl nodded, her arms unfolding slowly. John understood the burdens weighing them down, the complexities of lives intertwined with economic struggle and personal battles. He recalled how community bonds could break or strengthen when faced with hardship. I understand, he said, but we can change that. The rain poured heavily now, drenching the land, but it felt like a cleansing. In that moment, under the weight of the storm, they shared laughter, tears, and dreams, building a bridge where there once stood a divide. As thunder rumbled in the distance, they found common ground instead of conflict. John realized that a single act of bravery could shift an entire landscape, turning enemies into allies. After hours spent in conversation, the storm began to fade, the air cooling as the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle. The three youths stood, looking more resolute, their shoulders less burdened. John felt a sense of hope burgeoning between them, a fragile green shoot pushing through hard ground. They exchanged glances, understanding now that standing together was stronger than standing alone. It would take time, effort, and compassion, but they'd begun to hold the seeds of change within them. As the soft glow of dawn began to paint the horizon, John turned to them, a smile breaking across his weathered face. And together they would. Where there was once fear, misunderstanding, and shadows creeping through the crops, there now stood a farmer and newfound allies ready to tend to not just the soil, but the very foundation of their community. The evening air was thick with humidity, wrapping around the fields like a heavy blanket. The sun hung low in the sky, painting everything in warm hues of gold and orange. In the vast sea of corn, a secret drama was about to unfold. John, a seasoned farmer, had seen everything that nature could throw at him: droughts, floods, and pest invasions. But this evening was different. As he walked the perimeter of his land, he felt a rustle in the crops, a whisper that raised the hair on the back of his neck. Something was out there, hidden in the shadows of the towering stalks. His heart raced as he peered deeper into the rows. At first glance, the field was still, but he instinctively knew better. This wasn't just wind dancing with the leaves. This was movement, deliberate and stealthy. Three figures about 20 yards away crept low to the ground, their intentions masked in the growing dusk. John held his breath, the sweet scent of damp earth mingling with the impending sense of trouble. What were they after? He tightened his grip on the pitchfork in his hands, feeling its cold steel against his palm. It wasn't just a tool, it was a reminder. Reminder of the hard work, sacrifice, and love he had poured into this land. As he took a cautious step closer, the first figure paused, casting a furtive glance around. The shadows swallowed them almost completely, but John could make out youthful faces. They weren't much older than teenagers, their expressions flitting between defiance and caution. "Just grab what you can and let's get out of here," one of them said, a boy with messy hair and a look that screamed mischief. It sent a jolt through John's core. This wasn't just harmless fun. This was theft, plain and simple. Each of them moved with a purpose, slipping between the rows of corn, their eyes scanning for ripe ears. They didn't know the story of these crops or the blood, sweat, and tears involved in bringing them to life. They were about to plunder more than just corn. They were about to take a piece of John's heart, too. He stepped back, wrestling with the urge to shout out, to confront them, but he hesitated. There was a raw vulnerability in their actions, a desperation that struck a chord in him. Why would they risk this? What lay beneath their motives? The wind picked up again, and he noticed one girl in the group linger behind, hesitating. She was different, standing a little apart, unsure. Her eyes seemed to dart nervously from her companions to the crops, as though she felt the weight of the choice being made. She whispered, but her voice barely made it past the rustling leaves. "Because they don't care about us," shot back the boy, frustration bubbling under the surface. John's heart ached. He could relate. There were days he felt the world around him slipping away, trapped in worry about the rain, the market prices, and the next crop cycle. But this didn't need to be how they responded. There had to be another way. Just then the boy's flashlight flickered on, cutting a harsh beam through the dusky twilight, illuminating the rows of corn with an eerie glow. "Come on," the girl hesitated again, and John took a step forward. It was time to make his presence known. The voice boomed across the field, reverberating off the corn stalks. The trespassers froze, their heads snapping toward John. He could see their surprise and fear silhouetted against the fading light. He demanded, each word punctured with authority. The boy I'd learned his name was Michael sputtered, a mix of surprise and indignation plastered on his face. "Just taking some corn," he stammered, as though it was the most benign act in the world. John stepped closer, unfazed. "That's not just corn, that's food for a world that barely has enough." The girl, her brows knitted in concern, shifted nervously. We thought no one would be here," she said softly, her voice trembling as shadows danced around her. John replied, assessing them. He sensed their defensiveness, but he wasn't ready to back down. "No one cares," Michael blurted, frustration spilling over. And in that moment, something shifted. John caught a flicker of something deeper: anger, pain. He recognized a truth buried beneath their actions. They were upset, lost, searching for a way to be seen. "I know what it's like to struggle," he responded, his voice steady. "I've had my battles. Every year is a fight." The night wrapped around them, heavy with anticipation, as silence fell. The wind rustled the leaves, almost as if urging them to listen. The girl took a breath, glancing at her companions. "It isn't just about the corn," she said, her voice growing stronger. John felt a pang of recognition. How many times had he felt that same weighty isolation? It was a shared experience between generations, the struggle to feel valued, important. John's question hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in vulnerability. "You're just a farmer," Michael shot back defiantly. But John stood firm. "I may just be a farmer, but I've spent decades cultivating life. I've learned that we need each other. It's not just about me or you, it's about all of us working together." A rumble of thunder echoed in the distance. John could feel the tension in the air, like the stillness before a storm. He kept his gaze steady on the group, allowing a moment for realization to sink in. "Let me show you," he finally said, the rain starting to patter on the earth, mesmerizing. "Instead of taking, how about we share? Come help me with the harvest tomorrow. Learn what it takes to grow food, take care of the land. You want to feel seen?" They exchanged glances, a hesitant spark of curiosity replacing anger. The girl asked softly, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Absolutely," John replied, warmth flooding through him. "You can even have some for yourselves, but let's earn it." For a moment, fear and uncertainty hung in the air, mingling with the scent of impending rain, but something in his words began to persuade them. The flicker of hope began to shine through the evening gloom. I'd like to learn," the girl admitted, sounding vulnerable yet eager. Michael shifted, his bravado waning as he spoke. "It's just," John nodded, sensing a shift. The tension that had once pulled them apart was slowly knitting them together. "You'll find you choose how to define your worth." As the first drops of rain fell, he saw their shields begin to lower further, exchanged glances of contemplation. The evening's drama had shifted from confrontation to possibility, igniting a fire within them to find common ground. The rain poured down in earnest now, drenching the land, but somehow it felt like a cleansing of baptism into a new understanding. John felt renewed hope blossoming in the air, the electricity of potential humming between them. "Okay," Michael said with a hesitance mingled with determination. And just like that, a pact forged in the middle of a field, their shared struggles became a catalyst for change, creating a bridge where walls had once stood. As they made their way back to the farmhouse, drenched but strangely content, they collaborated, shared stories, laughter, and genuine moments. Under the weight of the storm, they found solace in each other's company, bursting through the tension that had once stifled them. Days turned into weeks, and what started as a troublesome encounter transformed into an unexpected alliance. The group became regulars on the farm, learning the intricacies of planting, nurturing, and harvest time. They formed friendships, grounding themselves in shared effort. John found joy in teaching them about the cycles of nature, the rhythms of toil and reward. They discovered the beauty of resilience in growing crops amid challenges, an important lesson that transcended the rows of corn. With each passing day, they began to understand the deeper meaning behind the earth and its fruits. Those once-enemy figures became allies, advocates for sustainable living, and representatives of a community where nobody felt invisible anymore. And as the seasons changed, so did they. The bond between John and the young group solidified, evolving from theft to friendship, transforming threats into moments of connection that brought life back to the farmland. The sun set on one of those evenings, painting the sky in stunning colors. They stood together on the porch of that old farmhouse, looking out over the fields they had all worked on. What had begun with shadows creeping through the crops became a tapestry of hope, a reminder that when you face the darkness, sometimes it's the very things you fear that help you grow stronger. In that moment, John realized he no longer watched over his crops alone. He had 3 incredible allies at his side, not just in harvesting corn, but in cultivating a new sense of belonging together. The sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting an orange glow across the vast expanse of cornfield. As the shadows stretched, John stood at the edge of his property, wiping the sweat from his brow. He took a deep breath, the earthy scent of tilled soil filling his lungs. But that evening, something felt different, unsettling, like a whispering presence rustling among the rows of towering green. A sudden rustle snapped his attention. John squinted into the dimming light, heart pounding as he noticed movement. Shadows flitted between the stalks, figures creeping with an unnerving stealth. His gut tightened. Trespassers. His mind raced, recalling the stories of people who stole crops, thinking little of the work and sacrifice that went into every ear of corn. He stepped closer, listening intently. "We just need a few," a voice murmured. It belonged to a young man, maybe in his late teens, whose bravado flickered through the cracking tension of the evening. John crouched behind a large stalk, the weight of the pitchfork in his grip oddly reassuring. There were 3 of them, 2 boys and a girl, familiar faces from the nearby town. He recognized them from the local diner, laughing over sodas and fries, unaware of the consequences their actions would carry. The boys moved closer, their eyes wide with a mixture of determination and fear. One suggested, motioning toward the heavier ears hanging low, golden and inviting in the fading light. "They're not our corn," the girl, who watched cautiously, replied. Her voice wavered slightly, hinting at doubt. "Don't be a coward, Jess," Michael insisted, his tone sharp yet tinged with fear. "We came this far, it's just corn." John's heart constricted. He felt the desperate hunger in their voices, a hunger he understood all too well. But how could they not see? Each ear of corn was a labor of love, a promise fulfilled through countless hours of toil. The girl just stepped back, her resolve wavering. But what if we get caught? In that instant, John understood the conflict raging inside her. She didn't want to be part of this. Deep down, she knew they were stepping over a line. He could sense it, an invisible thread connecting him to her, binding their experiences together. "Maybe we could just ask him," she whispered, glancing around nervously. But the boys shook their heads. "Ask him? What's he gonna say? No, we need to do this." That struck a chord inside John. He recalled his own struggles, the moments when he felt overlooked, as if his years of hard work meant nothing but stealing. That wasn't the answer. As they hesitated, John made his move. He stepped out from the shadows and raised his pitchfork, the metal glinting in the last rays of sunlight. His voice rang out like thunder, drowning out the stillness around them. They froze, caught in the act, fear etched across their faces. Michael, who seemed the leader of the trio, stuttered, "We were just." "You know it's wrong," John replied, the weight of disappointment thick in the air. "Do you think this is how you solve your problems?" The fear in their eyes quickly shifted to defiance. "You don't get it, old man," Michael shot back, the mask of bravado slipping. John recognized the desperation beneath the anger. He took a deep breath, feeling the tension melt into a moment of clarity. "I might not get it all, but I know that life can be tough. I've fought battles myself." Jess, hesitant, looked from John to the others, brow furrowing. "Maybe we need to find a better way," she murmured, almost to herself. Michael scoffed. "What, like asking for a handout?" As the storm clouds gathered in the distance, John had an idea. "Instead of taking, how about we make an agreement? You want corn, then come here tomorrow morning. I'll teach you how to grow it." Michael questioned, disbelief evident in his voice. "Because I believe in lifting each other up," John replied firmly. "And right now, you need an ally. I'm not here to condemn you." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Jess's face, torn between her friends and a newfound impulse to listen. She asked eventually, her voice soft. "Absolutely," John affirmed, feeling the weight of the mantle of responsibility fall onto his shoulders. The air hung thick with hesitation as they weighed his offer. While Michael's bravado simmered, Jess's curiosity began to bloom. "Fine," she said, her shoulders loosening slightly. Michael frowned, a mix of exasperation and reluctant acceptance. "I agree too," he said, voice resigned. John nodded, relieved but aware that this was just the beginning. "Meet me at dawn." As they turned to leave, John felt an unexpected sense of hope blossom in his chest. He watched them disappear into the night, shadows that had morphed from threats into possibilities. The next morning came with fresh promise. The sun peeked over the horizon, casting golden light over the dew-kissed fields. John stood at the entrance of his property, waiting. A few moments later, he spotted the 3 figures, weary but determined, trudging toward him. "Good to see you," he greeted with a steadiness that masked any nerves. Michael muttered. "Yes," John replied with quiet strength. They got to work, and as they dug their hands into the rich soil, laughter began to bubble up between them. John shared stories about his childhood, about planting the first seeds with his father, who had believed in growing not just crops but roots of community. "Farming is more than food," he explained. "It's about friendships, hard work, and nurturing." As the sun climbed higher, Michael began to soften in his demeanor, sharing glimpses of his own struggles. "I just wanted to prove we weren't weak," he admitted, wiping sweat from his brow. Jess chimed in. "We never wanted to hurt anyone." John looked at them, understanding their experiences painted with brushstrokes of desperation. "Each of you matters. This corn, it's not just a harvest, it holds hopes and dreams." Together, they tended to the plants, and slowly the air filled with a sense of camaraderie. That day, they laughed, shared meals, and forged an unexpected bond that grew deeper with each passing hour. Weeks turned into months, and the trio became an integral part of the farm. They learned how to coax life from the earth, understanding that every seed carried a story of its own. Michael grew proud, no longer masked by the anger he once wore. Jess blossomed, finding her voice amid the crops, while John grew into a mentor and friend. But their journey held challenges. One evening, heavy storms rolled in, threatening the harvest they had worked so hard for. John felt the weight of uncertainty back on his shoulders, the nerves tightening like a vice. Stay close. He shouted above the howling winds, rallying the trio. As the rain fell in torrents, the four of them worked tirelessly, laughing amidst the chaos, forging a family beneath the wild storm. In that moment of uncertainty, John felt the strength of their connection deepen, woven into the fabric of what they'd built together. And when morning broke, a soft light mingling with the lingering scent of rain, they emerged to survey the fields. As the sun crested the horizon, it illuminated not just the crops but the bonds they had forged. "They're still standing," Jess gasped in awe, relief flooding her voice. "They're stronger for it," John replied, a smile stretching across his face. In the months that followed, John, Michael, Jess, and their adventures became legend in the area. From tension and theft emerged a community built on trust and respect. Their once questionable motives transformed into a shared purpose, a mission rooted in resilience. The fields became a symbol not just of growth but of opportunity. They planted not only corn but dreams of unity, of friendship among the rows and relics of hard work. As harvest season approached, they gathered in the fields one last time, an air of celebration wrapping around them. Hand in hand, they took the first ear of corn, a testament to the journey they had overcome. Jess cheered, laughter bubbling from her lips. Michael replied, a newfound pride shining in his eyes. And as they sat together, surrounded by the fruits of their labor, John reflected on the incredible transformation. The shadows that once crept through the crops had become vibrant celebrations of life. In the heart of those fields, they learned the true meaning of community, nurturing not just crops but souls. Against the backdrop of the vast sky, they found hope, not just in the harvest but in each other. In that moment, the field stood not merely as a mark of land owned, but as a testament to the power of connection, the true roots of the land. And together they faced whatever the future held, forever strengthened by the all-consuming beauty of shared resilience and hope. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the vast expanse of farmland. The cornfield, with its towering stalks swaying gently in the night breeze, looked like an ocean of green, alive and breathing under the starlit sky. But tonight, something lurked beneath the surface, something out of place. John, a seasoned farmer, stood quietly at the window of his farmhouse, the warm light from inside spilling out onto the porch. He was no stranger to the sounds of the night, the rustling of leaves, the chorus of crickets, and the distant hooting of an owl. But tonight felt different, charged with an energy that set his senses on fire. He watched, and in the stillness he felt the creeping tension. Suddenly, a shadow flitted across the field, barely visible over the wheat. John squinted, leaning closer to the window. As if sensing his gaze, the figure stopped, holding still in the darkness. More shadows joined, creeping between the rows of corn, their movements furtive, like thieves in the night. Adrenaline surged through John as he reached for his old flashlight and a sturdy pitchfork resting against the wall. These weren't just kids sneaking snacks, this was something more ominous. He stepped outside, the cool night air wrapping around him like a cloak. Each step crunched softly against the gravel, his heart pounding as he edged closer to the field. He called, his voice steady but laced with authority. The whispers stopped instantly, and a tense silence fell over the still cornfield. John could see them now, 3 figures, silhouetted against the moonlight. They were young, perhaps teenagers, breathing heavily and glancing nervously at one another. "Nothing to worry about, farmer," one of them called back, attempting a casual bravado, but John sensed the fear simmering beneath the surface. John pressed, his grip tightening on the pitchfork. Grabbing some corn," the same voice stammered. "Styling," John countered, the word cutting through the air like a knife. "Come on, man," another voice broke in, nervous laughter barely disguising the tension. John could feel his blood boiling. They had no idea what those rows of corn represented. The long days under the sun, the sleepless nights worrying about the weather, the dreams of a harvest that might sustain his family through the winter. "Those aren't just ears of corn," John said, stepping into the moonlight, letting them see his resolve. The boy who had spoken first shifted nervously. "We just thought, maybe what?" John interrupted, frustration boiling over. But then he paused, realizing underneath their bravado was a glimmer of desperation. He'd seen that look before, not only in himself but in countless faces over the years. A beat of silence hung in the air as they exchanged uncertain glances. The taller one, a girl with dark hair falling into her eyes, finally stepped forward. "Look, we didn't mean to disrespect you. We're just, struggling." Just like that, the tension of the moment shifted. John could feel the weight of their vulnerability, struggling. He understood that word too well. He took a deep breath, letting the tension ebb away. "How about this?" John said, his voice softening. "Instead of taking from me tonight, why don't you come tomorrow?" They stared at him, disbelief mingling with something deeper hope. The boy asked, disbelief heavy in the air. "I'd give it to you if you earn it," John answered, feeling a warmth in his chest as he made the offer. "It's simple." An uncertain pause held the air suspended. The girl glanced at her companions, weighing their options. She finally asked. "No catch," John said, "just honest work." Michael, the first boy, stepped forward, eyes flickering with determination. "Fine, we'll help." John nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over him. "Fair enough, just be here at dawn." As they turned to leave, John felt the weight of the night lifting. There was a glimmer of something, maybe hope. He watched them retreat into the shadows, the moonlight casting long, wavering silhouettes on the ground. The next morning, the dawn broke with a vibrant palette of colors spilling across the sky. John stood ready at the edge of the field, his heart racing with equal parts excitement and apprehension. Would they show up? Would they take him seriously? To his relief, the three figures appeared, looking slightly less defiant in the light of day. They wore clothes that had seen better days and expressions that hinted at a life far from easy. Michael joked weakly, but John saw the mischief in his eyes. "Welcome to the world of farming," John replied with a grin, motioning them into the field. As they dug into the work, the morning sun climbed higher, casting its warm rays over the golden stalks. John shared stories of his family's legacy, how generations before him had tilled this land and gathered its bounty, teaching him that farming was a dance with nature, sometimes frustrating, but always rewarding. They worked steadily, the rhythm of the hoe against earth providing a meditative beat. With every bead of sweat that formed, more laughter replaced their hesitations. Michael dared Jess to see who could harvest the most ears in 5 minutes, and soon they were all laughing, the burden of cold tension replaced by warmth and camaraderie. Jess asked during a break, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. John paused, memories flooding his mind. "I grew up in these fields," he said slowly. "It's more than just crops, it's community, family, it's about the people you feed." A reflective silence fell among them, the weight of those words settling in. Each one of them began to see the work differently. They were not just pulling corn from the earth, they were cultivating a connection. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between John and the trio blossomed. They shared more than just work, they shared stories about their lives, their dreams, their struggles. Michael opened up about his family, how sometimes there wasn't enough food on the table. Jess talked about ambitions that felt out of reach, dreams stifled by the weight of reality. "I want to make something of myself," she admitted one night beneath the stars, her voice barely above a whisper. John listened, absorbing their frustrations, their hopes. He realized that their energy could spark something incredible, not just for themselves, but for the community around them. Harvest season arrived sooner than expected. The fields were heavy with ripe ears, and a sense of urgency filled the air. The time for gathering was upon them, a culmination of all their hard work. John called, his voice ringing out across the fields. As they raced to collect the ears, the joy of the harvest filled the air. Each ear pulled from the stalk represented not just food, but shared effort and growth. It was a vibrant mosaic made up of John's experience and the youth's energy and intermingling of wisdom and potential. They spent long hours under the sun, side by side, laughter echoing through the fields. Every moment turned into memories. Every row they cleared was a symbol of what could be accomplished when they worked together. They celebrated every small victory, the first full basket, the first family meal made with their harvest. But amidst the joy, John also sensed change around him. As the splendor of the harvest enveloped them, he recognized the shift in the trio. They were no longer just kids from the town. They had become partners, allies in this great fight against despair. Their confidence started to flourish, built on the foundation of respectful labor and the lessons of nurturing. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in hues of pink and orange, they gathered around a small bonfire made from leftover stalks. The warmth of the fire complemented their easy laughter, creating a cocoon of joy in the night. "I can't believe we turned this around," Michael said, glancing at John. "We didn't steal anything," Jess corrected, her voice steady. John smiled, pride swelling in his chest. "And look what you've accomplished." In the glow of the fire, they shared future dreams as well. Jess envisioned starting an organization to help kids in need, while Michael spoke about becoming an advocate for local farmers. Each aspiration seemed bold and bright against the encroaching darkness. "Look at that, dreaming big," John encouraged. As the night deepened, John felt that warmth and laughter created ripples that could extend beyond those fields. It struck him that this blossoming friendship had the potential to grow into a movement, one filled with purpose. With the end of the harvest came new challenges, but the experiences they shared formed an unbreakable bond. The trio began to take initiative, helping John organize small community events showcasing the beauty of working together, sharing resources, knowledge, and food. They arranged farm-to-table dinners, invited neighbors, and soon their little gatherings transformed into something beautiful, healing the rifts in their community, fostering understanding, creating a rhythm of unity. Word spread of John's farm, where the spirit of collaboration thrived. The town that had once felt invisible started to shoulder hope, proving that together they could face any adversity. As the seasons turned, the cornfields changed hue. The green gave way to golden brown, symbolizing their journey. John stood, looking out over the acres, aware that what began as a simple act of kindness had spiraled into a movement, a celebration of resilience and community. And in his heart, John knew that the shadows that once crept through the crops had metamorphosed into vibrant lives, filled with purpose. They had formed a tapestry of souls united, creating a future where no one felt alone. Beneath the golden sun, John smiled, feeling the pulse of the land beneath his feet. In the heart of those fields, they had nurtured not just crops but roots of a community flourishing together, forever bound by the lessons learned among the rows of corn. The world, much like farming, requires patience, resilience, and above all, a willingness to lift each other up. And sometimes, all it takes is one brave farmer and a few curious souls to spark a revolution. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the cornfield, a golden sea of rippling stalks basking in the fading light. The air was thick with humidity, and the scent of earth mingled with the sweetness of ripe corn. But there was something else lurking beneath the surface, something out of place. John stood at the edge of his land, hands resting on his hips, eyes scanning the field. He could sense a disturbance in the quiet of the evening. Crows cawed overhead, a warning perhaps, but it was the rustling near the far side of the field that truly caught his attention. Against the backdrop of whispering corn, 3 figures crept low, moving stealthily between the rows. Curiosity twisted within him, but as he stepped closer, a storm of anger brewed in his chest. These weren't just any trespassers. These were kids from town, young men and women who thought they could steal from him, as if his hard work meant nothing. His heart raced. He'd spent years nurturing these fields, pouring his soul into every seed. How dare they think they could just waltz in and take what was rightfully his? The thought ignited his pulse, urging him forward. His voice rang out across the stillness, sending ripples of surprise through the air. The intruders froze, caught like deer in headlights. Shadows cloaked their faces, but John could see the unease in their shifting stances. Someone let out a nervous laugh, but it was shaky, lacking conviction. One of them called, the bravado in his tone hanging tenuously in the air. John stepped into the dim moonlight, feeling the anger burning within him. "You think I won't notice?" More whispers flowed among them, the hurried exchange palpable, revealing fear mixed with guilt. "We didn't think you'd care," another voice piped up, softer, almost pleading. John echoed, incredulity washing over him. "These crops are my life." He took a step closer, the pitchfork gripped tightly in his hands. Its weight felt more symbolic now than practical. He stared them down, and in that moment he could feel the tension stretching like a taut wire ready to snap. He asked, his voice lowering. The girl among them, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward cautiously. "We're not bad people, we're just struggling." Something shifted in John's chest. He recognized their desperation. He had felt that hunger too, the biting cold of uncertainty gnawing at his own heart. But this wasn't the way. "Trust me, I know what it's like," he said, the fierceness in his voice softening. "But it doesn't have to be this way. Help me tonight, work with me in these fields, and I'll give you the corn you need." Their eyes widened in disbelief. The boy asked, glancing back at his friends, questions swirling in his expression. "Of course," John replied, sincerity radiating from him. "You can earn it." After a moment of hesitation, the girl nodded, her resolve making an impression. "Okay, fine," the boys reluctantly said, almost as if the decision itself stuck in their throats, and just like that, an unexpected alliance was born. John felt a mixture of pride and unease as he led them through the darkening field. They would work together, but would they hold up their end of the bargain? The moon rose high, illuminating their determined faces as they gathered tools and set to work. They laughed nervously, shifting their weight, but the atmosphere was charged with newfound purpose. John felt the energy shift from tension to something far more meaningful. As they toiled through the night, sharing stories in between pulls of corn, he observed the flickering light of their spirits. They were not just the doubts that had fueled him. They were young, hungry for growth, just like his crops. "Jess," the girl asked while wiping the sweat from her brow. "It's everything," John replied, pausing to catch his breath. "Every success is built on failure, every harvest woven from hope." She nodded, a spark igniting in her eyes. "I've always thought farming was boring, but seeing it like this, working for something." As the night wore on, the initial fear tangled into laughter and camaraderie. They shared jokes about the awkwardness of their situation, about their own struggles. John talked of the long nights spent worrying about storms, about how farming could break a man, yet somehow make him whole again. With every ear they harvested, John felt the roots of trust growing deeper among them, a connection blossoming where there once was conflict. By the time the sun began to rise, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, he realized how quickly they had forged a bond. Michael shouted, holding up a massive basket of corn triumphantly. They looked at the haul together, pride swelling in their chests like the dawn illuminating the day. Jess looked at John, her expression half laughing, half reverent. "Yes, we did," John replied, feeling an attachment to each of them that he hadn't expected. Over the next few days, this new alliance continued to flourish. Each morning brought more laughter, more conversations, and deeper sharing. John taught them about the land, how to plant, how to care for it, and how to gather what it had to offer without taking more than was needed. They grew not just in knowledge, but as friends. The barriers between farmer and child of the town melted away. Michael opened up about the struggles his family faced, how his parents worked multiple jobs just to get by. Jess shared her dreams of wanting to work with kids who felt lost, and how she feared that she might never have the chance. And John. He began to see pieces of himself in each of them. They reminded him of who he was when he was young, of the dreams he had almost forgotten beneath the weight of adult responsibilities. Jess suggested one evening as they sat on the back porch, the remnants of a hard day's work etched into their skin. John asked, leaning back in his chair, a flicker of uncertainty dancing in his eyes. I mean, we could turn this into something, a community group, teaching kids how to farm, how to respect the land. John felt a flutter of excitement at the idea. Michael chimed in, we've got the experience now. Jess grinned, eyes filled with passion. Suddenly, the idea began to grow in John's mind. He had always wanted to create something lasting, to share what he had learned with others like them. Together, they could build a legacy, a community restored. The weeks turned into months, and what began as a chance encounter in the fields blossomed into something that changed their lives forever. With every harvest, they invited more kids from the town to join them, teaching them about the land, instilling respect for nature and the beauty of hard work. The farm became a sanctuary, a place where barriers melted away and dreams took root. They held workshops, community dinners, and gatherings, welcoming everyone they could. The laughter of children filled the air as they scrambled to collect corn, racing toward the massive baskets. The more they worked, the more friendships grew. John watched as his once isolation melted into a community that thrived on connection, purpose, and shared goals. They fought through storms, both literal and metaphorical, together. With every tear shed, every ear of corn harvested, they lifted each other, embodying resilience. They weren't just growing crops, they were growing lives, empowering every single person who stepped onto that land. One evening, as John stood at the edge of his fields, watching the community come alive with laughter, he felt a surge of gratitude. He'd catered to every inch of soil, hoping to cultivate not only plants, but to forge a bond amongst those who shared this earth. He turned to see Jess sharing giggles with a group of children, Michael running relay races between the rows of corn, a pure smile lighting up his face, and John felt a wave of warmth wash over him. This was my dream, he whispered to himself, the weight of joy pressing against his heart. And as the sun set, painting the skies in hues of gold and red, the farm transformed into a tapestry of life, every thread woven with purpose and connection. They had started as shadows creaking through the crops, yet together they had become a family knitted together by trust, resilience, and a shared love for the land, a legacy that would echo through the generations. In the fields, they had not only found food but home. In each other, they found community. And John learned that sometimes it only takes a single spark of kindness to illuminate the path toward a brighter future. A future built on hard work, respect, and the power of lifting one another up, rooted deeply in the fertile soil of compassion. The moon hung low in the sky, a perfect silver disk illuminating the fields below. John stood on his porch, his gaze fixed on the vast expanse of his cornfield, the green stalks swaying softly in the evening breeze. But the peaceful night held an electric tension. Something was off. Suddenly he spotted movement, a flicker, just a shadow against the backdrop of thick, lush crops. Instinct kicked in. He squinted, straining to see what was happening. There, clear as day, a figure creeping between the rows. Then another and another. Were they really trying to steal from him under the cover of darkness? With a jolt, he grabbed the flashlight resting on the porch railing, the old wood creaking beneath his weight as he hurried down the steps. He slipped through the gate, heart pounding, knowing he had to confront whatever was out there. As he approached the corn, the familiar sounds of night, the chirping of crickets and rustling of leaves were drowned out by the thudding of his heartbeat. Shadows flitted closer together, their voices bubbling in hushed, frantic whispers. One voice urged, thick with urgency. John zeroed in on the figures, 3 teenagers, 2 boys and a girl, their faces obscured by the night. A rush of anger surged through him. How could they think they could just waltz in here and take what he had worked so hard for? The thought ignited a fire inside him, and he burst through the last rows of corn. The teenagers froze, eyes wide, caught in the act. Flames of defiance flickered in their expressions, but uncertainty quickly masked it. One of the boys shouted, taking a step back, almost stumbling over a stalk as he spoke. John held his ground, his voice steady but firm. "We were just, checking things out," the girl piped up, but her grin was half-hearted. "Checking things out, it looks more like stealing," John said, voice rising slightly. The boy who had been speaking earlier shifted nervously, glancing at the others. "It's just a few ears of corn, you wouldn't even miss it." The desperation in his tone caught John off guard, softening his anger, hunger. It was an emotion he understood deeply, the gnawing ache in the belly that kept you awake at night. But stealing, that wasn't the answer. "Listen," John said, lowering his flashlight, the beam slipping away from their faces. "That corn represents hours of work. Our family relies on it." The girl stepped forward, defiance morphing into vulnerability. "We didn't mean to bother you." She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Things are tough for us." John took a deep breath, his heart swelling with empathy. "I get it," he replied, sincerity woven into his voice. "I've been where you are." The other boy asked, skepticism etched into his brow. "How about this?" John proposed, the idea forming as he spoke. "Instead of taking from me, why don't you work for it?" Silence hung in the air, a moment steeped in uncertainty. The teenagers exchanged glances, weighing their options like a scale tipping back and forth. The boy repeated, skepticism still flickering in his eyes, but John saw a glimmer of hope. Yeah, work, John insisted. It's honest and you'll earn it. After what felt like an eternity, they nodded cautiously, appearing more surprised than relieved. Fine, the girl said, her voice steadying. As they melted back into the night, John felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. He knew that giving them a chance meant he might face consequences. Maybe they wouldn't show up, or worse, they'd come back to steal again. But offering an opportunity felt like the right thing to do. Dawn broke, spilling warm light over the land, and John stood at the edge of the field, anticipation mixing with anxiety. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the dew-kissed corn and casting long shadows across the ground. Would they come? A familiar rustle broke the silence, and before he knew it, the three figures emerged, looking slightly sheepish but determined. John couldn't help but smile at the spark of potential he saw in them. He asked, motioning them forward. He nodded, a mix of nervousness and excitement playing across their faces. As they stepped into the field, John felt hope beginning to bloom. He crafted lessons not just about farming, but about integrity, shared responsibility, and community. Over the following weeks, they learned the nuances of work, how to plant, how to nurture. They pulled weeds and harvested corn, learning to respect the rhythm of the land. Each ear they gathered wasn't just food, it was a testament to their effort and determination. As they toiled, laughter filled the air, weaving them together. Michael, the boy who had spoken earlier, told John one afternoon, wiping sweat from his brow. The girl Jess shared her dreams of becoming a teacher, a future that suddenly felt more attainable as they worked together. She often stayed late, helping John organize the crops. Her passion radiated, and John felt inspired by her enthusiasm. And then there was Daniel, the quieter of the three, who hesitated at first but slowly started opening up. He'd share his aspirations of becoming a mechanic, a dream that once seemed distant. This is kind of fun, he'd admit sheepishly, a smile creeping onto his face as they worked side by side, bantering and teasing in between tasks. As harvest season set in, the once struggling teens turned into reliable helpers, eager to gauge their success. The growing camaraderie brought a vital energy to the farm. One day, as they worked under the now familiar afternoon sun, Jess approached John, her tone noticeably serious. What if we did something more? The idea hit John like a wave, thrilling and terrifying at once. Like organizing a workshop, she suggested, her eyes lighting up. A weight of admiration settled on John's shoulders as he listened. That's a great idea, she affirmed with unyielding conviction. Encouraged by her passion, John brainstormed alongside them, mapping out plans for their first workshop. They rallied together to make flyers, reaching out to the community, spreading the word. As the day of the first workshop approached, excitement buzzed in the air like a summer storm. Kids from the neighboring town were invited, and as friends and families arrived, John stood back, pride swelling in his heart. Under the wide sky, laughter mingled with the scent of freshly harvested corn. The joy was palpable, kids running, their voices rising in delight as John and the trio guided them through simple farming tasks. See, it's not just about planting, John explained to a group of eager faces. At that moment, he could see the shift, the realization washing over them. They weren't just learning, they were engaging. A sense of belonging began to weave itself into the community, fostered by understanding and shared experiences. Weeks turned into months, and the little farming initiative grew beyond their wildest expectations. The community rallied around them, each workshop bringing more kids, more families. The once daunting struggles became shared victories, but it wasn't without challenges. There were days when the weather didn't cooperate, when crops didn't yield as expected, days when doubts crept in, whispering fear and uncertainty. One evening, as John sat on the porch with the trio after a long, exhausting day, he felt a wave of fatigue wash over him. Sometimes I wonder if this is all worth it, he confessed, looking out over the horizon, a mixture of hope and worry weighing on him. Jess leaned forward, eyes earnest. If we didn't try, we wouldn't know. We've built something amazing together. Daniel nodded, a hint of fire flaring in his voice. We're not here by chance. John felt the warmth of their words, their faith sparking something deep within him. You're right, he said with a smile, resolve settling in his chest. As they forged ahead, each challenge became less daunting, the fear replaced by unity. That summer, the workshops became a safe haven for kids, a place to learn, laugh, and grow together, breaking down barriers of loneliness and hopelessness, one ear of corn at a time. But change is rarely linear. Just as they began to find their footing, a dark cloud appeared on the horizon. Word of the new initiative spread, and John received unwelcome news. A local developer planned to buy the land to build a shopping center. The news hit like a lightning bolt, and for the first time in a while, doubt and fear returned. Michael asked, anxiety brimming in his voice. John could see the weight of worry etched in their faces, the realization of what they stood to lose. He gathered them close, determination surging within him. We're not going to let that happen, he said fiercely. That night, as they sat in the darkness, John rallied the kids, their fiery spirits igniting the air. They brainstormed solutions, writing letters to local officials, organizing community meetings to advocate for preserving the farm. You all have voices, he reminded them, inspiring belief in their power to create change. As they stood united, the community began to rally behind them, families joining the cause, local news picking up the story. John felt the winds of change shift in their favor, driven by the dreams they'd cultivated together among the crops. Days passed, and that summer dream began to crystallize into a movement, a testament to resilience in the face of adversity. With each letter written, each meeting attended, the passion of the community surged, stronger than any developer's greed. The day of the town hall meeting arrived, and John sat in the crowded room, heart racing. The energy was electric, charged with determination. As people spoke, they voiced their memories of the land, their stories of growth, all of it entwined with the heartbeat of the community that had formed on these very soils. When it was time for John to speak, he felt the weight of every person in that room, the hopes riding on his words. This land is not just soil, it's roots of family, dreams, and hope. A wave of support surged through the crowd, voices rising in agreement, a powerful tide determined to safeguard their home. When the town council ultimately voted to preserve the land, cheers erupted. John felt tears prick at the corner of his eyes as he embraced his friends. Jess, Michael, and Daniel stood beside him, the weight of their dreams woven into this triumph, and they knew this was just the beginning. The farm wasn't just a patch of land, it had transformed into a sanctuary, a place where seeds of hope could sprout, where connections flourished and lives were changed. As the sun set on the horizon that evening, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, John watched the vibrant energy of the community. They had fought for what they believed in, nurturing the soil of their future. Looking out over the fields, he felt the enormity of it all, the stories, the struggles, and the relentless spirit of hope. They had crept through the crops, yes, but they had emerged stronger, united as a family, growing together. In the heart of that farm, he had witnessed the miracle of transformation. They faced challenges, built dreams, and lifted one another higher than any harvest ever could. Together, they forged their legacy, deep within the rich soil of compassion, courage, and community. The moon hung like a watchful eye in the midnight sky, illuminating the sprawling cornfield with a ghostly glow. Shadows danced among the tall stalks, whispering secrets that rustled through the leaves. A figure moved cautiously, inching through the rows, heart pounding against the still night air. What were they doing here in the dark? John, the farmer, leaned against the porch railing, tension radiating through him as his keen eyes scanned the midnight landscape. Years of tending these fields had sharpened his instincts. A deep-rooted knowledge blossomed inside him, the kind that could sense trouble before it even showed itself. He took a deep breath, the cool breeze filled with the sweet scent of ripening corn mixing with the earthy aroma of damp soil. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, reaching for the flashlight resting against the wall. It felt weighty in his hand as he stepped off the porch, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. The old farmhouse creaked around him, as if sharing in his growing apprehension. With every step, the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Up ahead, he caught sight of movement again. A silhouette ducked low, its shadow melding with the plants. He tightened his grip on the flashlight, heart thundering as he approached the disturbance. He called, voice steady but filled with authority. The movement halted, breaths caught in throats. Silence fell over the field, thick enough to slice through. John held the flashlight higher, the beam carving through the darkness, illuminating three figures, young teenagers, their faces strained with fear and excitement. John demanded, stepping closer, determination radiating from him. "We're just," one of the boys shouted back, his bravado breaking under the weight of John's glare. John echoed, barely able to contain his anger. The other boy, Michael, swallowed visibly, stepping out from behind the first. "We didn't mean any harm, we just were hungry." John felt a surge of anger melt into something softer, desperation. He understood that feeling all too well. The gnawing ache in the pit of the stomach, the urgency of survival. "But stealing from him? That's not the answer," he said, voice measured but firm. "Those ears represent my hard work. You think it's just corn, it's a lifeline. You want to eat." The girl among them, her hair hanging down over her eyes, shifted uncomfortably. "Work, help me with the harvest." "I'll teach you how to gather and you can keep what you earn," John proposed, an unexpected sense of clarity washing over him. The three teenagers exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering across their faces. Finally, Jess, the girl, stepped forward, a look of resolve hardening in her features. "Fine, we'll help. I promise, no tricks," John said, an unusual weight of sincerity behind his words. Would they keep their word? As the day broke, rays of sunlight spilled across the field. John stood waiting at the edge, heart racing. Would they follow through? Soon enough, shadows appeared in the distance, slowly morphing into familiar figures. Michael, Jess, and a quieter boy named Daniel trudged toward him, determination etched in their expressions. John asked, a mix of curiosity and nervous energy coursing through him. "We're here," Michael replied, attempting a grin that crumbled under the morning sun. John motioned them into the field. They began moving through the rows, the soft murmur of the corn swaying in the wind surrounding them. John felt the atmosphere shift as they dug into the earth, the initial tension melting into laughter as they competed to see who could gather the most ears. Jess exclaimed, her eyes lighting up as she held up a freshly picked ear, triumph flooding her voice. Hours flew by, sunlight waning to the golden glow of evening. They shared stories as they worked, and with every passing moment, the kids blossomed into something more than mere trespassers. They became participants connected to the earth and to each other. As the sun sank lower, John decided to share more about what it meant to run a farm. Farming isn't just about the crops, he said, wiping his forehead. It's about hard work, resilience, and respect for the land. This is your chance to learn. The camaraderie among them grew, laughter echoing through the rows. They became a team, and soon visions of what they could accomplish together began to swirl in their hearts. Jess, always noticing the world around her, said, "We should do this more often. There are kids out there who need to learn what we've learned." The idea hung in the air, delicious and enticing. John turned to her, intrigued yet wary. "You really think you could pull it off?" Michael chimed in, excitement bubbling within him. "We've got a good thing going." All the while, Daniel remained quiet, his eyes flickering between the two. Finally, he spoke up, a spark ignited within him. "I'd be in." In that moment, John could feel the shift in the atmosphere. Possibilities began swirling like the growing storm clouds overhead. "All right, let's make it happen," he said, feeling the first hints of excitement coloring his heart. Days turned into weeks as they worked together to organize community workshops, gathering families from the nearby town and encouraging them to step into the fields and engage with the land. John witnessed the power of their ideas taking root, spreading outwards like the very corn they had harvested. But just as they began to find traction, trouble brewed on the horizon. Rumors seeped through the town like a creeping shadow, whispers about a developer looking to buy land for a new shopping mall. John felt the gut-wrenching anxiety clawing at him as he learned the truth. His farm was on the chopping block. A meeting was scheduled, and the realization that the land he had nurtured for decades might soon vanish ignited a firestorm within. The walls of the farmhouse felt more claustrophobic than ever, pressing in on him as the weight of potential loss hung heavy in the air. That afternoon, John called the teenagers together in the barn, urgency straining his voice. "We've got problems." The shock on their faces was palpable. Michael exclaimed, disbelief in his tone. "They can't just take it." "I know," John admitted, frustration bubbling to the surface. "But we can't just sit here and do nothing. We have to fight for this land." With that, a surge of energy filled the barn. They huddled together, thoughts racing, ideas bouncing around the room like popcorn. Daniel, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up, his voice steady. "Let's organize a rally. Show the town what we can do together." John felt a surge of adrenaline rush through him. "That's a great idea. We can gather everyone, share our stories, demonstrate the strength of our community." They began to brainstorm, the air thick with determination as they planned everything meticulously: flyers, social media posts, and community outreach. The more they talked about it, the stronger the fire in their hearts became. Days stretched into a week as they worked tirelessly, spreading the word about the rally. The anticipation hung in the air, electric with promise. John felt a rare sense of unity among the teenagers, an energy pulsing through them as they became advocates for something larger than themselves. But just when hope seemed brightest, shadows gathered. The day of the rally dawned, the clouds heavy overhead, threatening rain. John stood before a crowd of anxious faces, pride swelling in his chest. The support poured in from neighbors, friends, people whose lives had been touched by the farm. Then, as if fate itself had decided to throw down the gauntlet, a sleek car pulled up in front of the crowd. The developer stepped out, a smirk tugging at his lips, flanked by a couple of intimidating suits. They exuded power and influence, and the crowd parted slightly, whispers racing through the air as tension thickened. The developer called out, laughter laced in his voice, seeking to undermine their spirit. John felt a sharp breath catch in his throat, anger rising in his chest. This was his home they were playing with. He shouted, voice echoing across the field, resonating with strength. The developer raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "But the reality is simple. This land can be far more profitable as a commercial center." Jess shouted back, her voice rising above the murmurs. "This farm gives us purpose. It teaches resilience." The developer shrugged, clearly unconcerned. "You think that matters?" John stepped forward, feeling the heat of determination burning in his chest. "History matters, people matter. These fields are home to dreams, to families, to community." The storm clouds above began to rumble, reflecting the tension building around them. Rain started to drizzle down, gentle at first, then it quickly turned into a torrential downpour. As the skies opened up, John felt an electrical surge ignite within him. This was the moment, the storm of resistance they had all been waiting for. He raised his voice louder, cutting through the noise of the rain. "We're stronger together." That resonated with the crowd. Cheers began to rise against the backdrop of the storm, a collective voice pushing back against the shadow of the developer. Daniel shouted, confidence lighting up his expression. "We'll stand and fight for what we believe in." The storm became a powerful metaphor for their struggle. Rain drenched them, but they stood resolute, a powerful tide of humanity pushing back against the dark clouds looming above. As the developer's smirk faded, realization washed over his face. They weren't just fighting for a piece of land, they were fighting for their future, for their legacies for each other. But just as victory seemed within reach, a flash of lightning illuminated the sky, followed by an explosive crack of thunder. John's heart raced. Would this rally be the turning point he was hoping for, or would the storm overpower them? He He scanned the crowd, witness to the fire ignited in the hearts around him. Together, they stood drenched and unyielding, united against an unseen tide. What would be the ultimate outcome? Would they prevail, or would the forces arrayed against them prevail in this sudden downpour of a world that sought to push them aside? In that moment, caught between the thunder and the rallying cries, John knew they were on the brink of something monumental, suspended between fear and hope, ready to push back against the storm brewing both above and below. With every heartbeat, he felt the walls closing in, but standing together, they were far stronger than they knew. And just like that, the future hung in the balance, a potent mix of determination and uncertainty waiting for its turn to emerge.